Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, The Process ITIL Forgot, Security Incident Response. My name is Jesse Richard, and I'll be your moderator for today's session. Before we begin, just want to go over a few housekeeping items. As a reminder, this session will be recorded and made available after the live event. Slides can also be downloaded right via the GoToWebinar handout section, and we'll email both the slides and the link to the recording later this week. If you have any questions during the webinar, we encourage you to submit them via GoToWebinar. We also received a lot prior to the event that we will try to get to during the actual presentation, but we will also follow up at the end of the session with a Q&A portion to answer any unanswered questions. And today we have two speakers, George Spalding and Vincent Jeffrey. George is the Executive Vice President at Pink Elephant and is also a co-author of ITIL v3 Continual Service Improvement Core Volume. George has spent the last 3 decades helping individuals in 30 countries on 5 continents realize their full potential by simplifying complex topics and inspiring people to acquire new capabilities. In 2012, he was honored as a recipient of the Ron Munz Lifetime Achievement Award from HDI for his contributions to the service and support industry. Also on this webinar, we have Vincent Jeffrey, who is the Senior Director of Product Marketing with a focus on IT incident response automation, IT service alerting, team collaboration, and process operations and service management. He has expertise in critical communications, application performance management, IT process runbook, and workload automation. And with that, I'll pass it over to Vincent and George.
Thanks, Jesse. I think this is me, and I'm going to start off talking about. This is George Spalding. Going to talk about the scope of this problem that we're talking about, the security incidents or cyber incidents that and how they're proliferating worldwide. What are the major causes? What's the difference between a reactive response and perhaps something else? And then a concept that I do like talking about, cybersecurity, which we think we know what that means, and cyber resilience, and then service desk versus a NOC, Network Operations Center, versus a SOC, a Security Operations Center. Then we'll go into some detail, and then I'll do a little wrap up. Intermingled with all that, Vincent is going to speak about more specifics when it comes to when I get down to certain areas. So without further ado, let's move on. So the scope. So the number of, this is according to the Online Trust Alliance. In 2016, the number of reported cyber incidents that were specifically targeting business as opposed to just general viruses or hacks or things like that was 82,000. In 2017, the number of reported cyber incidents targeting business was 159,700. Just a little less than double. And since we actually believe that most cyber incidents involving business are not reported, let's stop for a minute. Why wouldn't they be reported? Don't be ridiculous. They have to report them, don't they? No, they don't. They have to report data breach, a data breach, especially that involves things like social security numbers, credit card numbers, and they have to report a data breach if it involves medical information or health records. That's a national law within the United States, is the health records, part of HIPAA, and part of what they call high tech. That was an acronym for a law that they passed about 5 years ago. But it's amazing, but still to this day, it's the individual states in the United States that govern data breach reporting as to how much you have to do and how quick you have to do it and how long you have to leave something available. So, and once again, if it doesn't involve a human being's or a citizen's social security number, private information, things like that, then the breach does not have to be reported. Certainly banks and things like that do not want to report if they don't have to, because it starts to erode confidence and things like that. So The Online Trust Alliance believes the number of cyber incidents in 2017 could actually exceed 350,000. Each successive year that we, like 2018, when we're in now, will become the worst ever scenario. These just keep going up. The number of actual cyber incidents just keeps going up. So therefore, this is a serious issue and we have to deal with this. So some of the leading causes, general hacking or a DDoS attack. DDoS is distributed denial of service. It simply means that 1 or 100 or 1,000 or 10,000 machines basically attack a website by simply asking for service from the website. They don't attack it per se. They just say, answer my question, answer my question, answer my question. But if they all do it at once and then keep doing it and keep doing it and keep doing it, the website, of course, has to time out. It takes, even if it can't answer the question, it takes 60 seconds for it to figure out it can't answer the question. So, long story short, there's no resources on the website left to respond to legitimate users. That's what a DDoS attack is. Ransomware is where someone basically grabs your data and says that I'll give it back to you if you give me money. And so the question there is, first of all, a lot of people, if they do it, if they pay, they don't want people to know that they paid in order to get their data back because they don't want them to know their data was that vulnerable to begin with. It tends to be more successful, the ransomware, and therefore they're focusing on medical records. They tend to be focusing on small to medium-sized hospitals and health groups and things like that. Obviously, one of the big causes for this would be weak credentials. Yes, it's just plain old passwords. It's just plain old weak passwords that are predictable or easy to guess in a brute force attack. The other one that seems to be prevalent and most recently in the headlines was the Equifax hack or data breach. And that was delayed system updates and security patches. In other words, they knew there was a vulnerability in their system and they chose to not fix it right away. So therefore, given that, it was relatively easy for hackers to then get in and steal the 140 or 150 million credit cards and social security numbers and everything that they took. And then there's good old social engineering. Social engineering simply is asking people, could I have your password, please? Now, it's not quite that simple. It's, hi, this is Bill from the help desk, and we're having this problem, and I need your password to check it out, that kind of thing. And then there's phishing emails, and I think that the phishers, if you will, are getting better and better at this. So what's happening is that an email appears to be something else, appears to be from my bank or from my hospital or from my medical plan or from my credit card company, and it says, we're experiencing a problem. We want to be sure that everything's okay. Could you please click on this link? And the number one thing you have to do to make sure that this is legit is to look at the URL, look at the actual address of the email, because almost every time it won't be usbank.com or americanexpress.com. It'll be something else, gobbledygook.com. So about the estimates are that 93% of this stuff could be avoided with simple practices that could easily be done, that are controllable. That's the key. It's controllable. So you need to update your systems with security patches very quickly after they come out from the various vendors. Obviously, the virus stuff, we all probably do that automatically, but we're now talking about security patches from operating system vendors and application vendors, things like that. One that that's kind of a little draconian, but it certainly could work, is authenticating emails. In other words, you have an approved sender list. So someone wants to send you an email, they get an automated response that says, hi, I need to put you on the white list of people I can get emails from. And it basically blocks all emails except people on the white list. So that's pretty draconian, but in an organization where some things are problematic, it might be the way to do it. Education in general, training, user training. is huge. And when you look at some of the various websites and they talk about the fact that really training ends up being one of the best things you can do, not just to avoid the hack in the first place or the data breach in the first place, but also they've discovered that more training will allow us to clean up and mitigate the risk even faster as well. Okay. So way back, you heard that I was one of the ITIL authors back in 2007 for ITIL v3, but long before I came along, the very first ITIL book that was written was one called Help Desk back in '89. And the basic definition of the help desk in that book was, this is the communication center. This is the single point of contact. Their real role is to communicate between IT and the business and IT and the customers. That's the role of the help desk. Now, they usually also do what's called incident management, which basically has as its goal, get the user back up and running, and we want to maximize uptime and availability. What we tend to use these metrics called mean time to repair, which is very operational. It basically assumes that this thing, if you will, is broken, whatever that is, whether it's a piece of hardware, whether it's an application, it's broken, so therefore mean time to repair, or more to today's world is mean time to restore service, which is MTRS. So that means that the user is back up and running again, the customer is back up and running with full capabilities of the service, which is, I think, more meaningful than mean time to repair, which tended to be a very operational kind of geeky metric. The problem with most help desks that we know today is that they are reactive, that they don't necessarily fix things before they break or look at the possibility that they could even fix things before they break. There's very little proactivity usually at the service desk, and it tends to be a very reactive organization. There are ways to work on proactivity, and we can talk about that at a different time with a different webinar. So, but in most organizations, the service desk today is still the primary frontline reporting and response mechanism for any kind of incident. Now, that may not be by phone, maybe it's by email, maybe it's by text, maybe it's by instant message. There's a lot of different ways. Maybe it literally is by social media, with the service desk actually monitoring certain collaboration or social media channels. But the point is that it still really is the front line. If something breaks and I'm inside an organization, I have two options. I can Google it and try and fix it myself. Not a good plan usually, but is done a frightening amount of time. Or I can call the service desk or contact the service desk and simply report my issue. Now, now getting to today's conversation. So how does the service desk actually tell the difference between a security incident and a regular operational issue? Well, in many cases they can't, or there's no real obvious clue sometimes, especially to people at the service desk level. And often cyber incidents are handled the same as operational errors. There's not a special process or a special way to do it. So why didn't ITIL back in the day, even all the way back in the 90s, why didn't ITIL have a complete security management, security response process and service as ITIL moved forward? Well, what happened was that all the way back then, there was a standard called BS 7799 back in the 90s. And it's an unfortunate acronym, I know, because some people automatically think all this stuff is BS. But it stands for British Standard. So BS 7799 became ISO 17799, which became, in later years, ISO 27001 and the entire ISO 27000 series, which is still valid today. So what ITIL basically did was, especially because it was British and focused and being written by all Brits at the time, Wasn't until 2007 that they invited anyone from our side of the Atlantic. So what happened was that they said, well, there's already standards in place. This has already been taken care of. It's already been handled. So they simply left it out. They just delegated the entire topic of security, really, security management, InfoSec, et cetera, to these various British standards and ISO standards. So therefore, they left it out. Security incident response was completely left out of ITIL. There is something called a major incident, but in the end, it was basically left out. Okay, thank you. So now let's talk quickly about cybersecurity versus resilience. So cybersecurity, this is the sexy one. This is the one that gets all the headlines, and this is the one where we've got all the jobs, and where you go to a job board and you're looking for a cybersecurity specialist, et cetera. All of those types of things where you got training, your ethical hacking, all of those things. That's great. It's the discipline, though, and all the practices that keep cyber incidents from occurring in the first place. So what you're really doing is you're building higher walls and thicker doors and better locks and putting razor wire on top of the wall to keep this from happening in the first place. Don't get me wrong, it's absolutely essential that we do this. Cyber resilience basically follows the principles that we're mostly familiar with that come from disaster recovery and business continuity, which says something bad has happened, now what? So you've been breached, your data's breached, now what? Is really calling the service desk going to solve this? So the question and what we're starting to talk about here is, what is your immediate instant security incident response? Because it's possible that really the best thing to do for the organization is actually to unplug the router and basically take the organization off the net. But the service desk is never going to do that. So basically, we need very specific security incident response. Vincent, you want to say something?
I'd love to, and because I totally agree with you, George. This is extremely important here, and I'm looking at the title for the slide: cybersecurity versus cyber resilience, and I like to say that it's not versus, it is with. You can't do one and not the other, and I agree with you. There are two aspects. There's on the one hand prevention and detection, and on the other hand responding to security incidents. But what I think is extremely important to understand here is that for fixing most security incidents, it will require the collaboration between the security teams and IT. This is not a one team job for most issues. And I'll see if you share the same thought here, George. I find it very interesting that companies have invested a lot in detecting security threats, with all the SIEM tools and so on and so forth. But we still hear almost every day that companies are being breached, right?
Sure.
And I think what's key here, and you just talked about it when you said immediate incident response. For security incidents, most of the time to containment is going to be key to limit, the damage to your infrastructure, your environment, your systems, and the contamination from spreading. And which if you look at this, that tells me something that there, for most organizations today, and we have data to back this up, there is a disconnect between the security teams and IT. They are not aligned towards the same goals. And so when something like this happens, and I'm looking at all the questions you have on your slides here, and they're all relevant questions. Most of the time, the security operations team is going to be bombarded with alerts from different sources. Should that be the SIEM tools, endpoint monitoring tools, you name it. And again, it is not a one-team job to fix the issue. So they're going to start communicating with other departments, other team, with emails, using emails, spreadsheets, phone calls. to try to hand off the situation. And what we see, it can become extremely disjointed and extremely complex. And back to your point about preventing and detection versus response to security incidents, I think, and that's my own opinion here, buying more security software is not going to bridge this gap that we see between the teams. And I would argue that collaboration is key. So my take on this one is that in the process, because we're talking about the security incident process here, while defining the process, even before going into who does what, we need to know who is responsible to help and help fix an issue when they happen. You will need to know who's going to be impacted as quickly as possible, so we can put together a communication plan with those people. And we need to know to identify who needs to know. And you talked about it, George, when you said compliance. For compliance reasons, we may need to communicate with norms and regulations authorities, maybe the CEO. Maybe you have to communicate with your legal department in case of a data breach. So it's extremely important that not only the tools, but the process and the people are aware of the actual incident response process. Make sense? So now we can talk about, and that's going to be interesting to get your take on, okay, so who should be responding to those security incidents? Should that be the service desk, the NOC, the SOC? George?
Sorry, I had my mute button on. So I think the answer there is that most people don't have a security operations center. Most people have some kind of service desk, some kind of frontline reporting structure, and most people have a network operations center for which basically is looking at the status, kind of green, yellow, red of the entire infrastructure. I think that as the security operations, as we start to get into this world where cyber incidents are actually doubling each year, now the question is, how much money do we need to spend? And we're looking at some data now that say that many organizations are spending somewhere in the neighborhood almost of 20% on security or ramping up security. So now the question is, if that's true, then we really need to start centralizing this, because security and security response are really specialized skills. Also, there's a different reporting structure often when it comes to the security end of things, not necessarily reports directly to IT. So the reporting structure can actually be a bit different. So where should these operational or security related issues be managed? And I believe that that's the SOC. They own the response plan. They own the security incident response. They own the communication plan. But the idea, of course, in all this is this shouldn't be completely reactive, like making this up when we're breached. We should have all of this plan already in place, because there's a joke, and it's not that funny, which is there's only two kinds of organizations: those that have been breached and those that don't know they've been breached. So this is, we need to look at this more like it's going to happen. This is in a way a disaster recovery business continuity exercise, where instead of it might happen, it will happen. So therefore, we need some plans in place.
Yeah, I totally agree with that. Now, when I'm getting this question, should that be the service desk versus the NOC or versus the SOC? I would love to say yes. I mean, your SOC should be responsible for that. Now, in reality, when I talk to IT organizations, what's happening and what the right answer to, at least to me, should be is all of them. We can't just assign one team with the responsibility to respond to a security incident. And
just to illustrate my point here, I'm going to take a short example. Let's consider that we are facing a DDoS attack. You mentioned DDoS attack before. So let's say we are under a DDoS attack. Let's say that, like we planned, our information security team, our InfoSec, is going to detect the issue. We've made the investment in the tools so that they should be able to do a good job at detecting an issue, knowing that DDoS attack is very difficult to identify, but given that. So, and we know that talking about the impact, every minute that goes by has an impact not only on the business, but also on the IT teams. So InfoSec detects the issue. They are going to make sure that it is not a false positive. So they're gonna declare a major security incident. They are going to activate their cyber incident response. So that means reaching out to the right people so that they can, work on resolving the incident, and at the same time provide all the communication needed to the service desk so they can update customers, right? But like I said, most likely the InfoSec is not going to be the first team to see that we are having an issue. Why? Because the DDoS attack is going to have a direct impact on one of, let's say, our critical application. Let's say we are in banking, our banking application is down or is going so slow that customers are not even using it, right? So what's going to happen is my NOC, my network operation center, is going to see it on the screen. It's going to see that now we have an application performance issue because you know what? The NOC has invested in APM tools, NPM tools, maybe event correlation tools, and so on and so forth. So we know when we have an application performance issue. What are we going to do? We're going to say, oh, big issue with this critical application. Let's activate our own incident response plan. And we're going to reach out to the right IT people. If they don't answer, we call the manager. It's called escalation. Make sure that we've got the right people from the different teams assembled in a war room, on a conference bridge, on a Slack channel, and so on and so forth. And we hope that we're going to fix the issue ASAP. And that's also a best case scenario because our NOC may not be as responsive as we wish. And guess what? In this case, it's the service desk that is receiving the complaints from the end users or the business users. And more and more people are calling into the service desk to say, you know what, we don't have access to the website. We don't have access to this application. We can't do our job. And what is the service desk going to do? They're going to log an incident in their ticketing system, in the ServiceNow, BMC Remedy, Sherwell, and so on. They're going to declare this incident based on the number of impacted people, a major incident. They will assign a major incident manager who's going to activate the major incident management plan. Great. Now we have another process going on where we're gonna try to identify and find the right people, escalate if we can't get a hold of those guys, and put them together in the same room, or on a conference bridge so they can work together and fix the issue. So what I'm trying to say here and to show here is that for the same underlying cause, we have different incidents seen by different teams who have in turn different processes and communication channels to get it fixed. And this is what modern organizations are facing today, where different entities are going to see different pieces of the same incident. And this is what, and that's my opinion here, this is what makes incident response and incident resolution much more complex today than it was before. And because you have multiple teams, sometimes the same, that are going to be involved by the different initiators, using different tools, different processes, and even different communication channels. So that makes it very complex. And I like this quote from Gartner in 2017 saying that coordinating incident response across the organization, that means across the cross-functional teams, is the biggest challenge for most enterprises. So again, the point is technology exist. But we can't just bring in new technology without revisiting the processes and the way people execute based on those processes. Because if we do that, if we don't do that, this is usually gonna go nowhere. We're gonna have the technology, but if we don't share the same processes across the teams, the same communication channels across the teams, this is not going to be effective. And that's my take on that.
No, that was great. I love that. Okay, so now let's go a little deeper into this SOC, this Security Operations Center. So, what are the responsibilities here? Well, obviously, there's a prevention type responsibility. So, basically, information security, data sec, configuration, and the various updates and patches of various configuration items. Also, access control would be in here, and then security education is a huge prevention. Vincent, do you want to speak?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. About the SOC. So about a Security Operations Center. Yeah. There are a few things that when talking with organizations, we usually bring to the table. And on the paper, a SOC is great. Getting a Security Operations Center is the best thing that can happen ever. Now, the question is for organizations is, can you really afford it? And the answer can be no. Sometimes, for large organizations, yeah, it's a no-brainer. They should have a SOC and they can fund and justify the investment. Now, for smaller companies, smaller organizations, it may be more difficult to justify the cost. Now, because again, and that's my point, it's not only about technology, it's also about your ability to easily hire security engineers. Can you hire security engineers wherever you're based? Can you retain those guys? You know that the market is pretty strong right now for cybersecurity engineers and operators, and so can you not only hire but retain? If you're going to have a SOC, are you thinking of a 24/7 operations? If that's the case, then how many people are you going to have on each shift? Just remember that just to get a 2-people shift 24/7, that requires 5 people to be hired. And I'm not even getting into the PTOs, the vacation time, the what if somebody's sick, That's a pretty significant investment. Now, there's another dimension that we should think about when thinking about putting together a SOC, or at least a team responsible for security incidents, is about the skills. So capacity is one aspect, but capability is another aspect. Do we have the skills within the team to use all these great security technology that those people are going to use? And why do I make it a big point here? It's because I've talked to several organizations where I am told, yes, we have the software, yes, we made the investment in the tools, but the person who was responsible for this software left the company, and we are now looking for someone to take over. Again, skills can be a significant issue for an organization. You have to make sure that whatever technology you're going to bring, you need to have the people who are going to be able to use it, and not only in the short term, but also in the long term. Like we said before, security incident response is not one or the other. It's not only prevention but it's also prevention and detection, but it's also response, and they have to be connected. They have to be linked together. So don't create a SOC team or a security team that's going to be totally disconnected from the rest of the IT organization. You have to ensure that this team is totally part of IT. Now,
can I make a comment along those lines? Because
please do.
It's not just that they have to be a part of the IT organization, or at least collaborating with IT. It's important because it's very possible that they that they could come up with conflicting priorities with IT. So you've got the NOC guys who want to do X, Y, Z, and the security people are saying, no, you can't do that. You got to do A, B, C. So the collaboration between them, and also the recognition that there has to be some clear ownership and some clear accountability along with all those skills. I think that's part of it as well.
I totally agree. And you just made a great point, George. It's not only collaboration, you're right. It's also synchronization and orchestration. The different teams have to know what they are doing, where they stand in the resolution process, and not, like you said, not do their own thing on their side, on their own. Another important aspect of responding to a cyber incident is going to be your communication systems. And that's also another investment that you may have to make. What if your communication system is compromised? We all remember the Sony Pictures story, right? Where the email system, the phone system was compromised, and that communication that was going on via email within the organization and within the senior executive at Sony Pictures was actually being read by the hackers. So how would you communicate with your peers, with your business impacted users, with the key stakeholders if the communication system is compromised? So this is also a question to ask. We just said that collaboration, communication, orchestrations were key. Now, what if those tools that we're using are compromised? And I have an answer for this one, actually. And now, technology is key. Like I said, I think I mentioned this a few times here. It's not about finding the best security detection tool. Technology is key, yes, but people and processes who are going to actually respond to those cyber incidents when they occur are going to be key. So training, you mentioned training, George. It's training, it's also processes. And my last point here is going to be about the fact that if you can avoid manual tasks, manual processes, that's going to make the whole end-to-end incident response process easier, faster, and more consistent. Because what we see is that the more manual tasks, the longer the resolution, the longer the collaboration, the bigger the miscommunication, and the higher the number of mistakes. So something to consider here. What you want to do is plan in advance. As you all know that failing to plan is planning to fail, right? So plan, know, and already know what should happen when this happens, and think about the end-to-end incident response process, not pieces of it, not detection in isolation. You have to think about the whole thing end to end. And this is just a diagram that shows you how we like to look at the end-to-end incident response process, or the security incident process that ITIL didn't talk about. It's pretty simple. We like to see it as, when something happens, the first thing you want to do is assess the situation. What is the severity of the issue we are facing? And we can use tools for that. That's where we're going to use the SIEM tools, the endpoint monitoring tools, and so on and so forth. Maybe some event correlation tools, so that we can capture alerts from different sources and make sense of all those hundreds of alerts. That's the assessment phase. Once assessment's been done, then locate. Okay, so at this point, we want to know who are the IT personnel, the IT engineers that should be contacted to start working on fixing the issue, right? Who are the resolvers that we're going to need to investigate and fix the issue? Who are the impacted business users, the people who are using the application and who are having issues? Or if it's an intrusion issue, who are the impacted business users in terms of who's using his or her computer on the network, who should be disconnected right now. So think about the impacted business users and think about stakeholders. Who are the people or authorities or entities or departments that need to be aware of the issue? Okay, so always think about three groups of people: the impacted business users, the resolvers, so the people who are actually going to fix the issue, and the stakeholders, people who need to know. That may be your legal department if it's a data breach and if you need to report this data breach to authorities. So this is the locate. Then act. We want to communicate with all those people ASAP. And again, in those situations, in those crisis situations, there is no time for guesswork. So everything, when I said plan before, that's where the planning is going to help, because messages, templates are going to be crafted already. So there's no need to craft a new message every time. Send the message, make sure they receive the message, make sure that the people would need to engage and be accountable for that, and provide them with the collaboration tools that they need. That may be, like we said, a Slack channel, that may be a conference bridge, maybe 2 conference bridges. And if your communication system is compromised, use a off-net communication system so that we can still work and collaborate without using the company's system. And so that's act. Once we've resolved the incident, analyze, and that's key. And I'm sure, George, you're going to agree with me. We see a lot of organizations, they fix an issue, they fix a major incident, and they forget. No, don't forget. Do a post-mortem. Do a analysis of what went correctly, but also what went wrong. So then the next time it happens, you'll be able to refine the plan and be even more efficient, right?
And
so
the post-mortem or major incident review, it's not just about the technical elements or what exactly we fixed or what was our vulnerability that caused this in the first place, but it's also about how the process worked. Did I get the right people involved early enough? Did I have communication? Was I able to do all that? That's part of the improvement that we can really gain some ground on over time.
Exactly, and to your point, it's the process. So how long did it take the people to acknowledge the notification? How long did it take those resolvers to jump on the conference bridge? And if they didn't do if they were not responsive enough, then we should have a conversation with them. It's team efficiency and response efficiency. You're right. Now, you also want to keep some of the audit trail information into storage. You may need, and I know that some of our banking customers, they need by law to store a recording of the conference bridges. Some need to keep a copy of the Slack channel or whatever chat up they use. And that's also part of the post incident task that you may want to do. That's part of analyze. So again, assess, locate. So assess the severity of the issue you're facing. Locate who are the right people to answer. Who do I need to communicate with? Who should know? Who should be informed? Then reach out to the people, make sure that everybody is accountable for what they're supposed to be doing, and then analyze, make sure that everybody did what they were supposed to do and did it the right way within the RTOs, the response time objectives, and use this information to refine and improve the process over time. And I guess this is my take on the subject, George, and I'm gonna let you cover your takeaways.
This is just my little wrap up here. What we've discovered over time, and this is no big surprise, is that the cyber criminals, they don't have to play by any rules at all. They get to make them up. They literally are making up their own rules. Yet we, in the security world, we find ourselves behind the criminals, because we're reacting to their new exploit or their new vulnerability that they've uncovered. Lawmakers are way behind that. There are activities out there that can cause our business, a great deal of harm that aren't even illegal. It's not illegal to create a virus. It's only illegal to distribute it. I know that viruses wouldn't do anything if they weren't distributed, but basically you can write and refine and test a virus and you're not even breaking the law. Data breach notification requirements are different from one entity, whether it's a bank, different from a medical facility, different in California versus New York. It's really not coordinated. So organizations today have to have enough security expertise on staff to survive and prosper in what some have referred to as even a hostile environment. Not hostile business environment, but just this living on the internet, living on the web, and having everyone connected all the time is becoming, in many cases, a hostile environment. And there's so many elements to both securing and building walls, but also reacting. This is, in many cases, these breaches are not a moment in time. They actually take, sometimes like the Sony hack, these guys were in there for weeks. They were in there for weeks until finally they got bored. But they basically were able to take anything they wanted, and then on their way out the door, they shut down everybody's and locked up everybody's machine. And Sony, as you talked about, had their communication system hacked, so they reverted immediately to paper. Basically, people were passing notes and walking around the office and things of that nature. So I think that we need to be realistic about the fact that this is going to happen to our organization. And if we don't think that it's going to happen, then we're living in a very rose-colored glass world, I would say. That's all. That's my takeaway.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you, George. Let's see I think we have a few minutes for questions. So, Jesse, did we get any questions? Maybe.
Yeah, great. Thank you, George, and thank you, Vincent. Just as a reminder, if you do have any questions for Vincent or George, you can submit them in the GoToWebinar panel. We have a bunch that already came in, so I'll start going down the list and see what we can get to. The first one is, are there any procedures or processes that can be used to identify security incidents rapidly and accurately? False positives can cause a bigger issue as well and can act as a decoy for true security breaches.
I'll take a shot at that. First of all, there aren't any real quick that's obviously a security breach. But what you do find is that they will come in and create what I would call a noisy breach, something that everybody pays attention to, starts to focus on, and then is distracted by while the real breach is happening behind the scenes and nobody's paying attention because they're working on something else. So that means that as we go into this world of security of a SOC, somebody's got to be fixing or working on the breach we know about. But the other side of it, which is watchfulness and seeing what's going on and monitoring, that doesn't stop just because we have a breach. So in other words, there's a recognition that we find out that, look, we need to keep watching as one team goes and starts working and fixing the breach we know about, the other people need to be basically continuing to monitor. I think in the future, the concept of artificial intelligence and machine learning is going to help in this area a lot.
Yeah, and I'm just going to add to that security issues can be of different nature, and there are some that are easily detectable, I would say. Like if we're facing a ransomware attack, it's going to be pretty obvious that we have an issue. Business users are going to complain about the fact they can't access a file or an application if they don't pay a ransom. So here that's pretty obvious. DDoS attack, same way. We're gonna hear either from the service desk or the NOC. That was the example that we talked about earlier. That we are facing an issue, and we're gonna be able to identify fairly quickly that this is a DDoS attack. Now, there are other attacks that are much more difficult to identify, and that can be intrusion. If someone from inside the company is getting to some high security servers and so on and so forth. So my take here is there's not one magical tool that you can just implement and say, you know what, anytime there's going to be a security threat, I'll see it on the screen. Now, processes should be really defined for all those kind of security threats. And for some, you're going to have to put some triage function in place. For others, it's going to be so obvious that you don't even have to go through triage. You're just going to go straight to what is the remediation plan that we've put together and just execute on the plan with the right resolvers, making sure that you are communicating with the right stakeholders and making sure that you're going to proactively communicate with the potential impacted business users so they don't log their computer on the network so they don't get attacked, these kind of things.
Do you have another, Jesse? Yep. Another question that came in is how much integration or sharing is appropriate for including security incidents with overall enterprise IT management metrics, et cetera? Ours are handled via a separate tool and process.
Go ahead if you want to take it. I have an opinion. So what basically this is about in many cases availability are we reporting on availability? And the next question is this reporting all internal? Because we can make some claims or talk about things internally that are confidential to the organization that we would never ever release out into the public. So I think that part of this conversation needs to be, are we talking about internal reports and internal metrics that will never, ever be made public? If so, then I think we need to look at availability and lump in any security outages that would be lumped in, if you will, with availability or lack of availability. But it's very touchy in terms of public reporting or the public finding out.
That's right. Now, when I read this question, if the question is about how much integration and sharing within the different IT teams, so within, for example, the InfoSec team and the rest of the IT organization, the IT ops and the NOC and service desk, I would say that yes, sharing and integration have to be key. Again, we don't want to be in a situation, and I think that the person who sent this question is right now, where everything is handled via separate tools and process, which works fine if this were a one team job, but it's not. Most likely, for most security incidents, it will require the collaboration with other teams from other departments. And if you're just using the tools for a particular team and the processes, that means that you don't have common processes across the teams. Therefore, there's going to be a lot of manual intervention, manual tasks, and it's going to be inefficient, and it's going to take so much time to get anything done, which is going to lead to a bigger damage and or bigger contamination of your environment, and it's going to delay the mitigation or the resolution of the incident.
Great. I think we have time for a few more. Another one that came in is how much does training play a part in incident response?
Well, I mentioned it earlier. I believe training is key, and there's actually data out there that actually supports it in terms of money. So in other words, a security incident will cost less. First of all, there will be fewer of them if training happens, effective user training and effective training in general about InfoSec and the various vulnerabilities. But there's data out there to support the fact that it will cost you less to clean up after a hack as well, if the users are well trained and they understand what needs to happen.
Yeah, And yeah, totally agree. There's some simple training that you can put in place in your organization to avoid, I'm going to say, stupid mistakes done sometimes by employees who don't know that they shouldn't click on a specific link. So I guess there's some education that is required to avoid potential security threats, and that can very easily be put in place. Again, there are, even today, I find that there's still a lot of people who are uncomfortable talking about IT security and cybersecurity in general, and are kind of afraid as soon as we say cybersecurity. And I think that's why I think training is key here to demystify the whole thing and explain what happens when this happens. And the same applies to the incident response process. Train your people so that they know what they are supposed to do when something happens, what they're supposed to do when they receive this critical notification on their smartphone that's going to say, we are under a major cyber, we're facing a major cyber incident. Join the conference bridge right now, or do something, or execute an action, so they know exactly what to do. And I would add to training, have some drills. Put people in real life situations with drills, and see how you can optimize and refine your processes when it happens.
And it looks like we have one more kind of follow up to this question that we can get to, and it's what kind of training is the best way to happen, video or face-to-face training? I hear that a large room face-to-face training is much better than showing video. George,
well, you're talking to a guy who trains for a living. So I certainly believe that face-to-face training is always a more effective way, but it's also usually the most costly. Because we're moving somebody. We're either moving the training expert into your company, or we're moving members of your staff to some place where they can be trained. So the video becomes more cost effective. Also, it allows you to retrain new people, because there's a lot of turnover in many organizations. So how do we trained everybody up in March, and now suddenly it's July, and I've got 10% of my workforce is now brand new. How do I train them? So the videos actually solve that problem, at least in the short term.
And George, that's a great segue, since we're talking about training, to remind everybody that next week is training week in Orlando, Florida. There's going to be the Pink Elephant 2018, right? And there's going to be a lot of sessions, trainings, and ways for people to share with their peers, to learn from best practices. So, and that's going to be the conclusion of this webinar, since we are getting to the top of the hour here. We will be at Pink Elephant 18 or Pink 18 next week. If you're going to be there, don't be shy. Come say hi. George will be there. I will be there. And we'll be happy to continue this discussion.
Thank you for the shameless plug, Vincent. That was great.
Thank you, George.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thank you, George, and thank you, Vincent, for a great session. As I had mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, we'll be sending out a link to the recording and the slides later this week, or you can download the slides directly from GoToWebinar now. So hopefully everyone enjoyed the content, and we'll hopefully see you in an upcoming webinar. Thanks, everyone.
Thank you, Jesse.
Thanks, Jesse.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.